Hi, I'm Natalie, the owner of Well Aligned Body Studio in Melbourne, Australia. I'd like to welcome you to this presentation named Step Away from Foot Pain, 4 Fixes for Achy Feet. In our studio, we teach classes in yoga, Pilates and restorative exercise. Over the past couple of years, I've really developed a special interest in foot health because I feel that it's really central to the health of the whole body. I've been in the fitness industry for over 13 years, and over this time there's been quite a few changes in the way that we train our bodies and also in the attention that we pay to our feet. Now, many years ago, we used to just pick up the first pair of running shoes or training shoes that we could find and put them on our feet, and away we'd go to do our classes or go for a run or a walk or whatever it is that we were doing for the health of our bodies. But these days we have such a wide range of shoes to choose from that sometimes it's really hard to know what is best for our feet and for our health in general. When we practice yoga, Pilates and restorative exercise, we're barefoot most of the time, but some people still do choose to wear socks for comfort or for warmth or whatever reason. I'm the kind of person who kicks off her shoes the moment I walk through the front door when I get home. And I was really amazed when my partner, when I met him, didn't do the same thing. I don't particularly like wearing shoes, and I love the sensations I get from walking around without them. He didn't even think about it. He'd be sitting down, eating his dinner or watching TV, and he'd still have his shoes on, and I just couldn't get it. This got me thinking, so what is it about shoes that I don't like, and why is it so alien to me that other people are happy to wear their shoes all of the time? So I was really interested when one of my Pilates clients about 6 or 7 years ago told me about a speaker at her workplace who lectured them about the benefits of wearing these new shoes that were on the market. They were funny looking and they had 5 toes on them, just like you'd have a glove on your hand with the 5 little fingers. I was intrigued about them, but it was cold and wintry at that time, and I wasn't about to try anything without any insulation underneath my feet. I don't really like the cold at all. Anyway, around a year or so later, they began making an appearance on the feet of a few people at the gym where I was working. I was a group fitness manager, and one of my instructors complained to me that it was unsafe for people to be training in shoes without support. Now, she also mentioned that the floor in the group fitness studio didn't appear to have enough spring in it as other places that she worked at, and as a result, people were getting injured. Now, this was a really interesting point, and I'll talk about this later. But at the time, I didn't have any answers for her, and this led to my further interest and research into the mechanics of the foot. So it's almost like going down the rabbit hole. The foot is such a fascinating part of the body that there is just so much to know. I'm sharing with you what we would call the tip of the iceberg, or maybe just the tip of the toenail in a vast ocean of knowledge to learn about the feet. So here we have some great images of the foot shown at different aspects, beginning from the foot as we can see it in our everyday lives, then with some veins, some muscles and tendons, and finally the bones of the foot. Now, Leonardo da Vinci wrote, "The human foot is a work of art and a masterpiece of engineering." The actual human foot has about a quarter of the total bones of the entire body. The human body has about 200 bones in it, and 26 of these bones are in the one foot. The foot also is comprised of about 33 joints, more than 100 muscles, tendons and ligaments, and a network of blood vessels, nerves, skin and soft tissues. Also, there are a few thousand nerve endings. These components work together to provide the body with support, balance and mobility. A problem with the foot can cause the development of a range of problems elsewhere in your body. If you can think of your feet as the base of the body, as in the same type of way that you would think about your foundations of your house, can you imagine what happens when one or more of the foundations starts to move or crack or bend? If this happens, the whole structure of the house is compromised. It's the same with the body. If we develop foot pain, this can begin to translate all the way up the body, beginning maybe at the knee, the hip, the back, and so on. And that can be different in every person or every day. the body will begin to compensate for issues at its base, and these issues can work their way up. That's pain that we don't really want or need, and it's not really necessary, providing that we're looking after our feet. There are many reasons that we can develop foot pain, but today I'm going to focus on the wearing of shoes as one of those major causes. So why do we wear shoes? A number of reasons, but the most common ones that we've thought about would be in the order of protection. That's protection from the elements, for support, and also as a fashion statement. Protection, one of the biggest reasons for us to wear shoes on our feet. So here in the slide we see a mother and her children going out for a walk on a trail in the bush, and no doubt they think that these shoes are the best things that they can wear to protect their feet from the elements, from a ground that might be too cold or too hot, or also if they stepped on a twig or a rock or something that could possibly damage their feet in some way, shape or form. It's summer here right now in Australia, and sometimes if I'm walking for very long periods outside on a hot path, it can be quite a challenge wearing minimal types of shoes. A few years back, when I first had my first pair of the 5-finger Vibram shoes, I was on holidays at Uluru, which you may know as Ayers Rock in Central Australia, and it takes about an hour and a half to walk around the rock, and I was so besotted by these new shoes that I just had to wear them everywhere. And once we got around about halfway around the rock, I just had to sit down and pick my feet up off the ground, because it was just that they just were not used to the elements at the time. That's an important point that we'll talk about later, about letting your feet become accustomed to wearing barefoot shoes, not necessarily just because the temperature of the ground being so hot, but for all sorts of different reasons. Shoes can protect our feet, so when we step on or bump into objects which may hurt us, such as sharp stones or nails or things like that that may be left lying around, it is nice to think that you do have some form of protection underneath your feet, but as we may learn a little bit later, we don't necessarily need it. Support. We've been conditioned to believe that we need shoes to help us support our feet and our ankles. Watching TV ads and reading print media can lead us to believe that we need support for our feet and ankles, as if our natural foot and leg structures are not enough for everyday functionality. A great example of this type of mindset would be when my partner, his daughter, and his daughter's child, my partner's grandson, were shoe shopping for the grandson. Now, both my partner and myself were trying to convince his daughter that the grandson didn't really need any shoes, and if he was to have one, because it was a requirement of his daycare, that he have a shoe with a very flexible sole, barely anything underneath it. Now, when we were in the shoe shop, the shop assistant actually drew my partner's daughter away from us and was telling her how it was really important for him to be having support underneath his feet. That led my partner's daughter to be very, very confused as to where to go. So how many times have you heard someone comment on the pain that they've got in their feet and legs from standing on a hard surface all day as a result of their job or activity that they were doing? A healthy foot should be able to deal with most of the things it encounters and not end up in pain. We're given all of those muscles and bones in our foot for good reason. Our feet were designed to be able to mold themselves around rough terrain when we're walking or running outside. In a natural surface, or in a natural world even, the Earth's surface is not flat and hard. There are stones and rocks and plant debris all over the place that we need to navigate with our feet, and our feet are great at moving over this type of ground. If you have a lot of support and padding in your shoes, your feet wouldn't feel this terrain and it would be much harder to balance.
The shoes that we see in this slide have become a very popular shoe over recent years. They were popular in Germany for decades, I do believe, but recently they've become very popular, especially here in Australia. They're known for having these footbeds that support your feet quite well. Now, this can be really detrimental to us because when we have that support, it stops the muscles in our feet being able to activate as best as they possibly can. Now, I used to practically live in Birkenstocks. They've gone all around the world with me. They've travelled so many thousands of kilometres, I would dare say. But I've also had to throw them out because I noticed that my feet weren't working at their optimal.
Fashion is probably one of the greatest reasons for us to be wearing shoes. Fashion dictates to us what we should have on our feet and what we shouldn't have on our feet. Peer group pressure is such an important thing, or such a big part of life, especially these days. Over the years, as the shopping experience has become more and more ingrained into our psyches, and when we're conditioned to purchase items as often as possible, shoes can then become a statement of who or what we are. Shoes can tell others about our class status, wealth, and fashion sense, and a whole lot more. We may judge others depending on what shoes they are wearing. I know a lot of women who have a thing for shoes. High heels can make you feel more attractive and better about yourself. I count myself lucky that I could never really walk in high heels. I felt worse for wearing them and not at all confident, so I very, very rarely wore them. Also, they were so painful on my feet. I still wonder just how people walk around in them, especially those women that I see on shopping trips or on city strolls, and their partner's wearing these nice flat shoes and the female is wearing the big high heel shoes. I just can't imagine how painful that would be. I have quite a few pairs of shoes myself these days, but every one of them now has a minimal sole, meaning that the heel is at the same level to the ground as the toes of the shoe are. Issues with wearing shoes. Firstly, the heels. What do heels on our shoes do for our body alignment? Next, we'll talk about foot squashing, or how the feet get squashed when we are wearing our shoes. And lastly, the over and under use of muscles in our feet, also as the result of wearing heels and body alignment. Here's a terrific image of the human body, 3 different ways, just representing what would happen if we put a heel underneath the base of the foot. Now, the image on the left is an upright posture. It's a pretty good alignment representation where the plumb line is going from the top of the body through the ear, down through the shoulder, the ribs, the hips, and the ankle. Now, what happens to that plumb line when something is placed underneath the heels? It actually tilts over to the side. In this case, it tilts over to the left. And if we didn't do anything to the body, right, this is how we would be. We'd pretty much fall over flat on our face. So the body needs to make small shifts and changes in it to bring itself back up into that upright position. And these types of changes are things such as putting a bend in the knee. It might be pushing the hips forward. It could be pulling the shoulders back, sticking the ribs out a little bit more, and changes to the head and neck, just to get ourselves upright because we have that heel underneath the foot. When we wear a shoe with a heel, and that can be any type of a heel, from a sensible, what we call a sensible, low and wide one, to a 6-inch stiletto-like heel, and everything in between. When we wear these heels, when we have them underneath our feet, it changes the dynamics of how the whole body reacts to the load that the feet are carrying around. That's the weight of our bodies that we're carrying around all day. A good example of this without using the human body would be, say, like if you had a table, and if one of the legs of the table or 2 of the legs of the table are not the same height as the other one, right, the table would be pretty wobbly, all over the place. So you could just place something underneath those legs to make them all an even height, if you think about that, like from the heel to the toe, and that way the wobbles would be gone. Heels and weight distribution. Wearing heels also affects the foot weight distribution. A flat foot has the weight evenly distributed. So the image here on the left shows 50% of the weight on the ball of the foot and 50% of the weight on the heel. Now this will change significantly when we put a heel, right? So in this position, or if in this instance, 90% of the weight now of the foot and the entire body is on the ball of the foot. So the toes are being crushed down by the weight of the entire body, and only 10% of the weight is on the heel. Wearing a heel significantly shifts the weight onto the front toes. Foot squashing. These two images represent a before and after of the feet, of my feet actually. They're not brilliant, but the one on the left there is the best representation I could get of how my feet were for many, many years. Right, notice how the big toes are pushing across. Even they look like they're actually even stepping on top of the next toes, and there's no space in between any of them. The picture on the right is now after a lot of rehabilitation type of work on my feet. There's now quite a large gap in between the large and the second toes, and the rest of them, well, we're getting there. That's a lot more of a healthy example of how feet were designed to be. Our foot is naturally quite wide around the toes, with space in between each one of the toes. We were born with the ability to move all of our toes individually, just like we can move our fingers to do our day-to-day tasks. Over time, this ability disappears if we don't use it. So if you think of a shoe encased around those toes, just like you would a mitten around your hand. If you wore that mitten all day long, would you be able to use your fingers individually to do other tasks? You can't really, because they're all stuck together. So luckily, we're not relying on our toes for washing dishes and using computers and doing those day-to-day tasks, unless of course you don't have any hands, in which case the ability can come back once again to use. Muscle over and underuse. Right, little shifts change the way all of our muscles work throughout our body, because everything is interconnected. Some muscles may have to work a lot harder than they naturally would, and others would be left inactive, depending on the type of activity we're doing, and also depending on the types of shoes that we're wearing. The picture on the left here is there to demonstrate people going out for a run. So the same muscles, when we're running in a particular way, we're using the same muscles over and over and over again. The picture on the right is demonstrating a woman with a nice pair of high heel shoes on. Now, when we put our feet into shoes like this, and we do tend to squash the toes down together, and the weight, as we've already seen on a previous slide, is down on the ball of the foot, that causes some muscles not to be used anymore. Right? And when we do that, the muscles atrophy. They can actually show up as problems in the body, very similar to muscles that have been overused. Right? When a muscle is over or underused, it can show up as pain, soreness, stiffness, or something like that. Under and overuse of muscles often happens because we wear our shoes for much of the day. Just how much we're affected depends on the type of shoe. Feet use and injuries. In this section we'll be talking about the forces, nerves, unexpected walking surface responses, and the use of orthotics. Forces acting on the foot. Now this is a terrific graph showing a foot going through the running motion. On this image, we're landing on the heel, taking the weight of the body through a flat foot, lifting the heel off, and then there's a push off from the toe of the foot, which will help to propel the body forward. And the graph will show just how much force is on the foot through each of those stages. So you can see it starts at around about a half of the body weight, and the highest impact would be more around about 2.5 times the actual body weight, just going through that motion. Right, we're bipedal by nature, so it stands to reason that one of the first places we can injure ourselves is our feet. One of the most functional movements that we do is to walk around. And when we're walking, we're creating an impact force of around about 1 to 1.5 times of the weight, our whole body weight on our feet. Now this can create functional issues if we're not standing or walking on our feet in the most optimal way. Right, this graph is actually showing the impact forces from running, and that can be from what we see here right up to about 3 or 4 times our body weight. So there's quite a lot of different distribution of the impact forces associated with barefoot running. The nerves in the foot. We have thousands of nerves on the base of our foot. I was surprised to learn that the receptivity of the skin on the base of our foot is almost identical to that we have in our hands. Yet when we put shoes and socks on and we wear them for a lot of our day, the information that we're receiving from the ground is often distorted, just like it would be in our hands if we were wearing gloves all day. We just wouldn't get the same sensations that we'd get if we're walking around barefoot. Now, as we get older, we lose some of the ability for our transmitters in our feet to give us the signals that we need. We also often find ourselves wearing more and more supportive shoes as our age, because the belief is that we need more padding and protection from the elements, when what we really need is less support and less padding as our nerve endings become less sensitive to reading the ground. There's a brilliant study by Robbins, Waked and McLaren that concluded, as we get older, our sensitivity of touch becomes lessened. Up to about the age of 40, we tend to have the same sensitivity, but then after 40 it decreases. When we are 90, we have only about 25% of the sensitivity in our feet that we had when we were 40, and when we wear shoes with more padding for support and comfort. No wonder we fall over. We can't feel the ground so well. Unexpected surface response. Our body also predicts or reads the surface of what we're walking on before we even touch it with our feet. This is known as a feed-forward response. And it helps our body to adapt to the surfaces that are in front of it. So when unexpected changes are underfoot, and we don't adjust accordingly, this can lead to injury. Now this brings me back to my earlier comment where one of my instructors was talking about the sprung floor in the group fitness studio. Now she said that it wasn't sprung well enough and people were being injured because of that. Right, that may have something to do with the actual surface or what is underneath the ground. In Melbourne, where I'm from, we've got a huge sporting culture, and our biggest winter sport is called Australian rules football. Not so long ago, there were big changes made to the playing surface at one of our major football stadiums, and soon after, the players seemed to be getting injured more often than before. Their bodies were adapted to a particular surface, and the feedback, or even the feed forward, they would get from the ground as they were running and jumping throughout the game. Now the surface has changed and the prediction, response and adaptation by the body was not appropriate. Orthotics. How many of you have been prescribed orthotics to correct foot dysfunction? Is the issue your footwear rather than your feet? A bare foot has a large tread area, as represented on that picture on the left, whereas on an average shoe, the tread area can be reduced by 60 to 80%. This reduced tread can have an impact all the way up the body, ankles, knees, back, neck, and so on. I learned a great example of comparison from the sock doc. Think about orthotics as your shoes, as like being in a car accident and suffering from whiplash. You're given a neck brace to wear, and this is a great thing to help you hold your head up as the acute pain subsides. Now, what if you were told that you had to wear this neck brace for the rest of your life? You could take it off to have a shower or go to sleep maybe, but for the rest of the time, you would be wearing this neck brace. How would you feel about that? Now, it doesn't seem right, does it? That's pretty much what you're being asked to do when you wear orthotics in your shoes. It's for the rest of your life. And I suppose it's similar to wearing glasses, where they get adjusted to become stronger as you age. Transitioning to barefoot or minimal shoes. Here in the photo, we've got a good selection of some shoes belonging to some of the participants in a recent yoga class. You can see there's a good selection. Some are completely flat, some have some little heels on them, some are wider in the toe box, some are narrower in the toe box.
Right? Just as wearing shoes with heels can be detrimental to our health, so can going directly from a shoe with a heel to going minimal or barefoot. And doing this really quickly can cause some pain or injury. So it's best that when we transition to a lower shoe or a minimal shoe or to walking around barefoot, that we do it in stages. If you're a constant shoe wearer, a great way to begin would be by taking your shoes off for short periods when you're at home. Now, ideally, you'll be barefoot, especially if you have smooth and slippery surfaces in your home. But the next best thing would be to wear socks with grips underneath it. And those grips would be like those little round rubbery patches attached to the bottom of your socks, or little shapes also attached to the bottom of your socks. And the reason that we want those is that when you're walking around, we're pushing off a little bit with the back foot, and these will stop you from slipping all over the place. Once you've been doing that for some time, you might try making a bit of an obstacle course around your home. You could start by scattering some pillows or cushions over the floor as a little bit of a balance challenge, different type of a surface underneath the feet. Or if you have children and your children play with Lego pieces or something similar, something that is not going to break or hurt your feet too much by walking on top of them, you could scatter those around the house. You can try walking on those. What we're trying to do here is to stimulate the plantar receptors in the feet, right? The receptors underneath them that will help us to wake up the muscles that often we haven't been using very much. Next off, what we want you to do is to try and go for a walk outside in your minimal shoes or barefoot. Now this could be as short a walk as just going down your driveway, or maybe even a trip around the block. Now that's depending on how large your block is. Gradually, you can make your outside journeys longer and longer. Now just how slowly you do this will depend on how long you've been wearing supportive or heeled shoes and whether or not you have any foot issues or injuries. The transitioning of your usual footwear to minimal footwear can take anywhere from a couple of days to weeks to months or even years. You are the person who will best be able to determine this, just how long it will take for you to do this. And the key is to listen to the signals your feet are giving you. Sometimes we don't feel the pain until later on. I was really shocked when I decided to change out of my normal shoes to minimal footwear. At the time, and now, I spend a lot of my day already barefoot, teaching yoga and Pilates classes. I never really wore shoes, and I rarely wore a shoe that had high heels, and that was mainly because I couldn't walk in them, and they were incredibly painful. And anyway, besides, a lot of my time was spent working in a gym where my uniform consisted of wearing gym shoes. Now I thought that these shoes don't have heels on them. Well, I was very surprised because I just jumped straight into wearing these shoes and wearing them for an entire day. That at the end of the day, the backs of my legs were really sore and I was painful, and I went through this stage for a couple of weeks. It wasn't really the best way to be doing it. So if you can remember, take this transitioning one step at a time. Take note of how you're feeling, not only in your feet, but in the rest of your body, and you can go from there. It can be safe, and in a way it can be really liberating. So now, although I own quite a few pairs of shoes, none of my shoes are any higher in the heel than they are in the sole, and that's even shoes that I wear for going out.
So now moving on to the more practical part of the presentation, we'll be talking about 4 exercises to help eliminate foot pain. And you could do these as I speak about them. If you could stand up and find a nice space that is comfortable for you to stand on, a recommendation would be to take your shoes and socks off and do these with bare feet. But the 4 exercises that we'll be speaking about are toe lifts, the top of the foot stretch, calf stretching, and ball rolling.
Toe lifts. First we need to work on our stance. Here's a couple of photos that we took of me in different types of alignment. The photo on the left is me trying to stand pretty badly. I've got my knees bent, I've got my pelvis forward, the shoulders back a little bit, and my head's forward. The photo on the right is a lot better alignment wise. It's not perfect, but there's more. If you can have a look at the line drawn through the center of the body, the plumb line is going from the ear down through the shoulder, the ribs, the hips, and down through to the ankles. So I'm in a much more upright position. All 4 of the exercises that I'm going to be speaking about start with a correct stance position. Relieving foot pain can be as simple as learning how to stand, and you can try this right now. So first, stand up. That's if you can, if you're not driving or somewhere where it's impossible to be standing up. And once you're standing, check in with your body and see how you're feeling from your feet all the way up to your head. Are there any points in your feet that are feeling particular pressure or pain? How about in your knees, hips, back, and shoulders? You can even close your eyes to get a real sense of just what is going on within your body. Just give you a moment or two to check in. Just scan the body with your mind from the bottom to the top, and the top right down to the bottom. Once you've established that, step with your feet as wide apart as your hips. Take a little lean forward and look down at your feet. Move your feet so that the toes are facing forward. Now, keeping your pelvis where it is in that forward leaning position, begin by lifting the head and the body into an upright position. If you find your front lower ribs are sticking out a bit, see if you can just relax and drop them down. And there it is, you're standing tall. Once you have your stance, check in with your body again and see how it feels. Do you feel more support from your bones rather than from your muscles and ligaments? Notice where the weight is on the foot. Do you feel yourself gripping with your toes? Is the weight more on the inside or the outside edge of the foot? Compare the two. Are you carrying the weight the same on each side? Now, take your awareness up your body from your feet through your knees, hips, ribs, shoulders, and finally the head. Can you stack these bones, one up on top of each other? Think about having a string attached to the top of your head and someone is pulling it up to the ceiling, giving you extra length throughout your entire body. A good indication of knowing that we have the weight back on our heels is being able to lift all 10 of our toes. So if you can't actually do that, see if you can bring the weight back a little bit further onto the heels and put some pressure down into the balls of the feet as well. We don't want to be toppling over backwards. Right. Now that you are able to lift your toes, can you pick them up and spread them out so wide that there's a little bit of space in between each of them? Once you've done that, pop them back down again and then see if you can just lift the big toes up off the floor and then put them back down again. Then keep the big toes on the floor and lift the other 4 toes up. That's on each foot with the big toe still down. Practice alternating one to the other. So all the toes down, big toes up. Big toes down, the rest of the toes up. Then with time, once you're able to do that, you can start lifting one toe up at a time. So maybe start by lifting up the big toe, then the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, and then put them down in the opposite way. Little toe, fourth toe, third, second, and big toe. And then we go the other way. Little toe up, fourth, third, second. Big toe down, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Another great way to find space between the toes is to pop a toe spreader between them, like the ones you receive from the foot manicurist after having a pedicure. You can also buy these quite cheaply in $2 shops or your local supermarket. You can do this right now though without having a spreader by putting your fingers in between your toes. See if you can get the fingers all the way up to the knuckles. This can be quite painful at first, but with practice, your toes will open up and thank you for it. If you're a TV watcher, this would be the perfect time to practice this. If you don't want to try it with your fingers, or for a more advanced version, you can thread your toes one next to each other. So the right toes thread in between the left toes. This is probably the most challenging way of working at getting the toes apart. Top of the foot stretch. For the top of the foot stretch, you may wish to come close to a wall or next to a chair for a bit of extra balance assistance. First, come back to your basic stance. Take a deep breath in and out and become aware of how you're feeling. Relax your body as best you can. Then step onto the right foot and lift your left foot and leg off the ground. Then bring your left leg back behind you and curling the toes under, begin to gently place some of the weight onto the top of the left foot. Think of it like being a ballet dancer on her toes. Now, if this is painful at first, take it very lightly. If it's not painful, gradually increase the amount of weight placed on the left foot. You may just begin by just having the tops of the toes on the mat. But once this gets better for you, once you've had more practice and the muscles on the top of the foot start to open up, you'll be able to curl the toes much further back and also take some more weight onto the foot. To modify this in cases of too much pain or when balance might be an issue, the same stretch could be done sitting in a chair with the leg, that's your leg, taken out to the side. Then the toes are curled under. Hold this for up to 1 minute. Once you finish that, bring the feet back to your natural stance, or the stance that we've learnt, and check in with both of your feet. Do they feel different? More alive? Do they have that tingly sensation? We're starting to wake the feet up. Do this same stretch on the other side, and then check in with both of them to see if they both match. Calf stretching. What does calf stretching have to do with foot pain? Well, quite a lot really. It can help alleviate foot pain. And this is because we have two major muscle groups within the foot area. The first group of muscles are known as intrinsic muscles. Now, intrinsic muscles are those muscles that you just find in the foot. The second group are known as extrinsic muscles. Extrinsic muscles are not only found in the foot, but they go up the back of the leg as well. And the calf has muscles in it that are part of the extrinsic group. Now, one of my teachers, Katie Bowman, and you may have heard that name a number of times if you've been listening to any of the other presentations in this Health Summit, she says it has everything to do with it, especially when we wear shoes with lifts. When we're wearing a shoe with a heel, the shoe has the ability, or it actually creates that shortness in the muscles that go up the back of our leg. Over time, the muscles get shorter and then they can start to pull the foot into a permanent point. And this can create pain when we take that lift away from underneath the foot. So if we can lengthen the back of our leg muscles, we can ease the pain from underneath the foot. Now, it's a relatively simple stretch, but we need a little bit of a prop to help us do this one. So if you have a towel or a blanket or something similar handy, yoga mats are a really terrific thing to do this if they're rolled up. If you have one of those lying around, please find that one, and we will first find ourselves in our basic foot stance. Right, once we have that basic stance, with the heel on the floor, place the ball of one foot on top of the rolled up towel or your mat and stretch. It's as simple as that. What we're looking for is both of the legs to be straight, and if you're not feeling a stretch by standing on the dome or the mat or the towel or whatever it is that you're standing on, you can move your back foot closer in to the front foot until you do feel that stretch. If you're not too sure what your calf is, and I actually had someone in a class yesterday who said, what is the calf? That's just the back of the leg, the lower bottom part of the leg. Ball rolling. For this one, we need another prop, and the prop this time will be a ball. We want a ball that has some type of give in it, something that's not too hard. You don't really want to start off with a golf ball or marbles or something like that. A tennis ball would be a great start, or if that would be too painful for you, a softer, more squashy ball. I'm thinking something like a stress ball that you're given to hold on to and squeeze in your hand at times that you're feeling a lot of tension through the body. There are lots of different ways that we can use the ball to roll away pain, and I really encourage you to be creative with that ball. But today we'll begin by placing the ball underneath the ball of the foot. Now that's just behind the toes at the bottom of the foot, and then you just simply put your whole body weight onto it. Keep your heel on the floor so the ball doesn't roll away. Now if that's painful for you, just back away a little bit with the weight. Just take some weight off it, and then you can practice putting more weight on and less weight on. Try that a few times, and then when that feels okay and you're comfortable there, with even pressure, start to roll the ball from side to side across the foot. And then you can keep doing that underneath different parts of your foot. So once you've started underneath the ball of the foot, or once you've finished that exercise there, roll the ball further down the foot towards the heel and do the same thing. One of the key things here is to try and be consistent with the pressure that you have with the foot on the ball. The next way to roll that ball underneath the foot is to start with the ball underneath the base of the big toe. Put some pressure onto the ball here, and again, being consistent with that pressure, roll it along the length of the foot all the way to the heel. Now repeat this move beginning under each toe. So first you did the big toe, then under the second, third, and so forth. Lastly, with the ball underneath your foot, make some random scribbly type of movements underneath the whole foot. They can be backwards and forwards or side to side, or a combination of all of those. Think maybe a figure 8 underneath the foot. Once you've done a few of these movements or all of these movements, step off the ball. Bring the feet back into your stance that we've been practicing, and compare the sensations of the foot that you've just worked on with the foot that you haven't worked on yet. Does one of these feet feel more awake and alive? I certainly hope so, and I really hope that's the one that you've been doing the ball rolling on. Over time, you can experiment with different ball types, sizes, and firmnesses. So possibly the golf balls can come into play after you've been doing this for a while. But once again, be creative, have some fun with it, and do it when you're not doing anything else, or you are doing something else. You might be watching TV. That would be a perfect time to stand up and roll around on the ball. I like to be standing up and use my computer and have my feet either stepping on the ball or rolling it around. You can bring these exercises into your day, even if you're in the office, if you are able to slip your shoes off. So have some fun with it, and let us know how you go. So finally, a very sincere thank you for taking the time out to listen to this webinar. If you have any questions about what I've been speaking about or about the exercises, please don't hesitate to contact me via my email, natalie@wellalignedbody.com. You'll also be receiving a link to a free 20-minute video that will show these exercises and some more exercises that you can do pretty much anywhere at any time, and you can follow along with these at real time. And one last thing, please also take the time to listen to the other webinars that are part of this virtual Women's Health series. There's some really amazing, talented ladies presenting some fantastic information that could really benefit you health-wise. So once again, thank you very much.